morning, good afternoon, or good evening where you are in the world. But no matter what, happy Friday and welcome to Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole with my good buddy Billy Strange. Billy, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday?
Great.
Are you?
We are just great. I don't know. I thought I'd start the show off on a really positive note.
Good, because I'll take it downward quickly. I feel like that.
You and I both we're having PC problems.
So yeah, just a little apologies for being a little late today. I managed to throw my headphones down, and literally it couldn't have been more perfect a slam dunk that my right earbud went right in my coffee and deep in the coffee. And when I pulled it out,
Deep.
along with it came a bunch of coffee, and so I'm hearing the weirdest version of us here today. Everything's a little out of whack. Hopefully it'll be better. And that is the reason for the late start. And then beyond that, I was just late this morning in general. Like, I just couldn't get things going. So I was late on the stories. I had some old stories. Thank God, Billy, you're here. We would have been talking about like 2 week old news. And you'd be like, no, dude, that's old. So,
Well, if I can do anything, I eliminate stories for us.
so what have you been up to this week? Actually, it's been 2 weeks. We didn't have a show.
I was going to
last
say
week.
it's been a while. I don't even remember what I did. So my band played a show
Right.
with Skin Lab, and it went really well. And then this week, so I messed around with GTR2 some more, finished up all the license. They're not license tests, but the driving tests. Finished that up. That was fun. And then this week I was just kind of preparing. I didn't want to start a project. I was anticipating WRC8 coming out on Tuesday because that's when I think the deluxe version was supposed to come out. As most people probably know, that went to an Epic Game Store exclusive, and they had some issues trying to get it out. So then it came out yesterday, and it included like a couple extra cars that would have been an add-on for the deluxe, not the deluxe, but I don't know. There's 3 different versions. So they gave you a couple cars.
Okay.
And then, so I had prepared on doing that on Tuesday. I had also prepared for iRacing on Wednesday. And neither one of those things happened. So then I was left kind of going, twiddling my thumbs and kind of going, well, I've got a bunch of other stuff I could be doing. So when I was done with work, I just did other housework. I tried WRC8. I'm working on kind of an impressions. I don't know if I'm going to call it a full-blown review yet because I haven't gone through the career. The career looks great, though. And WRC8 as a whole is massively improved, in my opinion, over WRC7. Let's see, the force feedback's better. Graphically, it might be a little better. That's kind of it wasn't a bad looking game to begin with. I think this one performance wise runs much better.
The Sim Contender references Gamer Muscle's review. He did a quick review that came out today, and one of the things that he mentioned is something that struck me. Now, I haven't driven it since the trade show build that I drove a while back, but their attention to detail on the tracks and as much off the track
the
as
courses
on the track,
are amazing.
Yeah, it really blew my mind, and that was an early build. I'm hearing a little bit of echo from the computer over there. Are you guys hearing that, or is it just me?
I can hear it every once in a while.
I might have to do something about that. All right, so continue your thoughts as I turn down the speakers.
Like I said, I'm working on my review. I think that they've done a really, really good job. Unfortunately, no VR implementation in it, which is something that I'll have to edit in because I don't think I have that in my review. It's so hard because I don't use VR. So I often forget to include that when I'm talking about it. And yeah, I'm just really impressed so far. So far, I'm pretty impressed. Sound quality is okay. Could be better. Sound could be better. Driving physics seem to be pretty good. I don't know. I'm still formulating thoughts on it, but I think it's a better title.
I
I think they
from
did, I think they did a really good job. How about that?
Well, that's good. That's certainly good news. Everybody wants to certainly hear that. What else did you do?
Then I drove in a brief moment that I had left between recording and then starting to edit. Hopefully, I'll have the WRC8 video out today. And then I tried a handful of laps with the new tire model on the Aston Martin. And that was weird because I made sure to drive it before the update
Uh huh.
so that I could pay attention to the differences. And at first, when I drove it, I was kind of like, it kind of feels the same. But then, the tires, what's funny is like the old version, obviously the tires are really good basically right out of the gate. So I could tell that the tires weren't warm because it wanted to light the tires up much easier. But what was interesting is the more I drove it, the less it felt like iRacing, like the old tire model. There's still hints of it there. I feel more secure in this tire model. I think that the braking is still, in my opinion, braking is too sensitive in iRacing. And it was funny when we tried the first version of the tire model on the Skippy, I was like, wow, the braking is like cool because I can really use the brake like I would in a real car. And now we're back to be very nice and smooth and easy with the brake and very sensitive. But I think overall it is an improvement. I like it much more. I still need to drive it with, I want to drive the K&N car. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try the Skippy with the damage model. I got to see that. I'm going to drive the Corvette. I did purchase the Audi, the touring car. So I have to drive that still.
That I
I
drove.
bought, did you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I purchased Fairbury, the short track, the dirt short track.
Uh huh.
And then I need to try the Pro Light 2 short course truck.
Right.
So that'll be another review that I'm going to be working on right after I'm done with editing the WRC8 video. So yeah, wait, and then everything came all at one time, and it's just like
It was so much, such a concentrated week. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have NASCAR Heat 4 coming out next week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all right in this small
and then
little
Grid coming
bubble.
out right after that.
Grid's in October.
What else? There's more coming out than that too.
I feel yeah. Automobilista 2 comes out in December, or it's supposed to. But I feel like there's something else I'm missing in there.
Yeah, I feel the same way. All right, well, that's certainly
Sim
plenty.
Contender asks, did iRacing go the same way as ACC with all the tire contact points? So that's something that I noticed is I got up on the curbs and I can't tell if it's the tire model or maybe I'm just hitting them different. So I need to test it more. So I'm not willing to make a definitive statement, but it seems like it's more pliable over the curbs. Because I noticed I was testing it at Zandvoort and coming out of the final turn, if you're carrying a lot of speed, you're going to kind of hit that last curb as you're coming across. Well, when I did it before with the Aston Martin, it would get up on the curb and it would just spin the car out.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm hitting the curb and it doesn't hardly wiggle. Like it just does this little float over the curb and I just keep going. So it's something that I want to test more. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't know if I'm just driving it different because I feel more confident in the tire model or if the car is actually reacting differently.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah. What did you do?
I did a few things this week actually, and I think one of them will lead to something I'd like to talk about at the end of the show. Actually, now that I think about it, so a week and a half ago now, because it took me an entire week to get my head back in the game. Um, I drove a lucky dog race in the Chodas at Laguna. That occupied the entire week, and then when I got home for a couple of days, I was just tired. I mean, like a little sore, not like overly sore, but I was sore from 3 days of driving, and I was really worn out and tired and dehydrated, and it took me 2 or 3 days to just get any kind of movement out of me. So it ended up being longer than I thought as far as the time away. And then I was having a little bit of a hard time, honestly, transitioning back to like sim world, which you
back
know,
to
yeah, I
back
mean,
to back to non-real life.
yeah, and I hate to say and admit such a thing, and I've always kind of had a different line. Like again, I think back to when I was racing karts and I'd run home to sim race. Fatigue could have been a little bit of a factor that wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. So I'm not 100, but it was a little weird. I was like, yeah, I could sim race or I could just be lazy and watch TV. And I opted for the second. Now, there are a bunch of cool things on TV, so I had plenty of distraction. And then came this week, though, and this being a big week. So the iRacing update to me was a big deal. The potential of a new the damage model in sim racing across the board is something that I've found frustrating, and as I've been pondering sim racing as an entertainment source, esport, a la esport, right? It should be called entertainment, not electronic, right? If it doesn't offer the entertainment, then it will not exist. And I was thinking, gosh, it's the damage that we see, and nobody wants to admit such a thing, but many people are in the stands watching real life racing for the possibility of a wreck. Now, no one wants to actually see anyone get hurt or maimed or die, but they are there for the wrecks. That is a big part of the entertainment of racing. And, I mean, that sounds terrible, but I think it's a reality. Well, sim racing wrecks have really looked terrible across the board. And I just think it's kind of cool that we're going to get somewhere in that direction. So I was very excited about the new damage beta model that's only on the Skippy, and that was something I wanted to test out. I was also very excited about Catalunya because it's a really important track, and right now one of my biggest complaints about iRacing is the lack of proper road racing circuits. That you can't even emulate like a Blancpain series or an F1 series, or yes, you can do NASCAR, but you can't even do a proper IndyCar season because all the tracks aren't there. So Catalunya is a very important track. I love that that's been added, and it's one of my all-time favorite tracks. So that was something else I was eager to test out and try, and did. So I drove the Skippy happily. I drove the new Audi RS3 LMS, the touring car, which, well, we're going to cover that in the season build, but we've both kind of talked about it. I like that car being added because I feel like a lot of sim racing has gone to a level of car that isn't necessarily make the best racing. And, I know people get mad at me whenever I bring up the Miata, because I still, to this day, think the Miata is one of the best racing cars in the game, and it's because of the racing. You can't get away from each other. You are always door to door in the Mazda, and it just makes for fun. This might be the next step up in that level. A little more horsepower. It's only like 350 horsepower. It's not a gross amount of horsepower. And I think that it's going to make for really fun racing on the road side of things. So that's kind of my hopes of that car, and something that I really did enjoy, as far as testing and playing around with. And I got to see Catalunya, and it was nice. Still had sort of that static look, like I drove that in the Audi, and comparing the way that car felt at Catalunya compared to the Skippy, driving it at where was I? Your favorite track,
Zandvoort.
Zandvoort. Thank you. And man, the Skippy had so much life and interaction with the track and in the force feedback in the wheel. Now it's a totally different kind of track than Catalunya.
Right.
Catalunya could be perfectly smooth, but driving it in that Audi at Catalunya, it was a completely different sensation and feeling to the Skippy at Zandvoort. Anyway,
Oh,
that was some of the fun that I had. I didn't get a chance to drive any of the WRC8 yet. Definitely got to jump on that as well.
I'm again. I think you'll like it. You know, there it's not perfect, but I think it's much better than WRC7. So
Right,
I think you'll like it. And I am happy that they have. I mean, it is a full blown career mode. I mean, you can go do single rallies and rally uh, championships without having to do that.
right.
But if you want something that keeps you coming back, I think this. I mean, I barely got into it. I'm like, ooh, oh, this could be really cool because it's got all these different brand. It looks similar to F1,
Right.
but there's other systems going on. I mean, you got to pay for crash damage. You've got to pay. I mean, it's cool.
Yeah, and
It
that's
looks
what I
cool.
want from
So
a rally sim.
I can't wait to like get. I've only done a couple races. I started in. You can either start in the WRC2 category, which is still the all wheel drive, but it's like less horsepower,
Yeah,
or you can start in the JWRC, which is the front wheel drive cars. So I started at the very bottom,
gotcha.
and they're spec cars. You can't set them up. So they are handing it to me right now. I'm barely hanging on to like, second to last. But then I went and drove single race or single rally, and I'm finished. I put it on the hardest difficulty, and I'm finishing right, right on the podium somewhere in there. So the difficulty's right.
Uh
But
huh.
then starting in this starting in this career like this, I mean, they are handing it to me right now because
Right.
you've got crew members that you still level up. So that seems to play a factor as well. I don't know. I
Right.
like this kind of stuff. So
Well, good. No, I agree with you. And again, we talk about having a decent career mode in certain types of games in particular. And that can be a very important aspect of that game. And it could be and the polar opposite to say dirt, you pretty much get everything right out of the bat. It's not like you're holding out waiting. It's like you can get in right now and do a full season without waiting for a certain calendar date to have certain things open up.
yeah, and how they did the calendar. I see two questions really quick. I'm gonna answer. Sim Contender. No one has mentioned multiplayer for WRC8. Does it exist? It does, but it's not open yet. It's grayed out. You can do like they have challenges where you do a rally and do leaderboards and stuff, but the actual multiplayer isn't alive yet. And then Cranky Pants, am I playing WRC on the PC Epic Games Store or the console? I'm playing on PC, which is an Epic Games Store exclusive for 1 year. Uh, the calendar, though, is really interesting. At first, I was like, does this do anything? But what it does is you have weeks. They're not days, they're
Right.
weeks. And you can go do a test. They've got something called extreme. It's like extreme driving conditions or something. I mean, it is tough. It's just sheets of rain coming down. I said sheets. It's sheets of rain coming down
No push
at
ups.
night. I mean, I was so lost. It was so difficult, and you have to drive with what they give you. So maybe the car is not correct or whatever. And then other times a team will scout you out, and you have to see how far you can get down the stage in the time given. It's not how fast can you make it, it's how far can you make it before the time runs out,
Right.
which is kind of a cool variation. And then you have your regular rally weekends, and each rally you have a short-term goal and then a long and like a medium-term goal, and all of it affects your relationship with the team. You level up, so every time you level up you get like a credit to go put into your skill tree.
Okay. So you can spend it at will, so to
Uh-huh.
speak. Okay.
And then you also develop a relationship with the manufacturer. So my assumption is I haven't got there yet, but what it looks like is the better you are with the manufacturer, the easier it might be English to get onto a WRC team. And if you do poorly, they'll fire you.
Oh, wow.
The team will fire you. So I don't know. It looks cool.
Right on. That's cool.
I mean, I'm kind of excited. So neat.
Awesome. Okay, well, yeah, so beyond that, that's pretty much what I drove. Again, it's been sort of a recovery week for me, in that respect. And then obviously a lot of racing coming up. And the other thing I want to talk about, but we're going to hold off till the end of the show. I think we'll move on to the news now. But one thing I want to say coming off of this week and a half was I got the best version of real sim to real life driving than I've ever had before. And I think some of my opinions and thoughts on where we're similar or where we're parallel or where we're completely wrong have completely changed. And that's coming because I've never had a more one-to-one car, track, real-life combination in a very close proximity of time. And it was very intentional, too, by the way. To do it that way. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe some other people have some questions or thoughts on that comparison. And I'm going to make you purge into your brain a little bit on your thoughts on that when we get to there. But let's get on to the news real quick.
Everybody cannot like me. I couldn't help it. I had to say it. All right. We on to the news now?
Yeah. Let's move on to the news. You want to get us started?
So as we talked about earlier, Season 4 build is out for iRacing, which again includes, like you said, Barcelona, like I said, Fairbury. We have the Audi RS3 LMS, the TCR car, V7 tires on a handful of cars, new damage model on the Skippy, and we also have updated. They're not really updated. These are new cars because guess what? It wanted me to buy them, and I'm like, no.
All three of them.
Three. So until they get a tire model and AI in for those cars, I will not purchase those because they're just, to me, there's no point. But yeah, all three, including the new Toyota Supra, is in there. So for all you iRacing fans, you should. I would assume most of you already know that it's out there ready to go.
And plenty of things to play with there if you want to spend a little bit of money. Everything's going to cost you money except the Pro 2 Lite. What's that?
The Pro 2 Lite is not it's free.
I think I need to change tonight's truck race to that truck then.
It's a lesser horsepower if I'm not mistaken.
That's probably good for most people because the Pro 2 is a really tough truck. Maybe the Pro 2 Lite will be a better fit for a lot of people. But
Probably.
If it's free, then we need to run that, but you'd still have to buy the track, whatever we end up running tonight.
So did anybody else see this? I thought they showed off a screenshot of Crandon for the trucks.
Yes. And in fact, I told people Fairbury, but we're not going to race the trucks at Fairbury.
Well, I mean, that might be fun. I was hoping Crandon would be in this build because that would have been really cool, but it was not.
I thought it was.
So did I.
Yeah, that's kind of why I made that error in my email in a frantic pace this morning. I was like, oh no, the new dirt track, and I just didn't think, and I was like, oh, it must be Fairbury. But no, that's not. Nope. Anyway, yeah, I was hoping for that as well, and that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to get a dirt truck series going on Friday nights, and we've had enough people out there each time to have fun, but we've not had enough people for me to start a season knowing how much fall off happens during a season. So it's just been Friday night fun in the trucks, which we're going to do tonight at 5:30. And now because of the Skippy damage model, and it's officially on the new tire model. I don't know if it's new to the Skippy or if it's just that the Skippy's led the way on the new tire model, but it does in fact have the new tire model. And it was a blast. The roller coaster part of Zandvoort where you're coming over?
Yes. Yeah.
For the first 2 laps, you have to really feather the throttle and be delicate with the wheel.
I was running the Aston Martin, and I had to do the same thing. I had to be very careful those first couple laps because, especially coming out of that hairpin, it just wanted to roast the tires. I spun it the first time coming out of there,
Yeah. And
and then I could feel it as you go through that left and the right and over the hill. I'm feathering the throttle and chasing the car, and I'm like,
yes.
okay, this is like when I go out on cold tires in my kart. Like I have to kind of take it easy for a lap and a half.
Yeah, I couldn't get optimal until at least 3 laps into a stint in the Skippy.
I was turning my fastest laps in the Aston Martin like lap 6, lap 7.
Yeah, that's about what I was feeling too. And I feel that that's more realistic. I mean, that's my memory of racing or driving, and in just about any discipline is you actually have to be a little careful on cold tires. Coming out of the pits on cold tires, you touch the brakes and your thing might just go backward on you. In just about anything. Is heat a factor in dirt racing at all?
Yes.
Do you feel cold tires, or you just have an optimal grip point?
Tires can seal over.
Okay.
Especially when you're running different classes affect the dirt differently. So when you're running a late model, that holds all the heat in and directs it down towards the dirt, which dries the dirt out quicker.
Okay.
If you're running like a wing versus a non-wing sprint car, the non-wing sprint cars tend to slide across the track a little more, so they tend to slick it off. And then wing cars will actually put ruts or really shine one groove of the track. Like we're really hard on it in a different manner.
Like
and
you're mashing it down into it more than spreading it.
And it really changes how the track. So all that changes the heat levels in the track. And once the track starts to slick off, like the track will really start to retain the heat, and you'll start to spin the tire more, which all causes more heat. And like last night, they ran in Chico, and the first night was hooked up, no tire wear, basically. Last night, the tires went bald because it had slicked off and started to take rubber on the track. And, you have to tire manage at that point.
Right.
You can overheat the tires even when the track isn't so slick. You can actually blister them. So
Wow.
we have a grooving iron where you can put extra grooves in the tires. You can also do something called siping the tire, which puts tiny little cuts in the tire, which helps alleviate some of the heat. So depending on the temperature, you either want the tire to stay nice and hot. So like if you ever see the guys under yellow and you see them kind of romp on the throttle and go, whoa, like this, they're trying to clean out the motor, but they're also trying to get the tire to fire, to stay hot, so that because you can feel it going into turn 1. If you haven't gotten if the tire's still not warm, it's a little sketchy going in. So awesome. Yeah, there's definitely temperature issues with tires and dirt racing.
Thank you very much, Front Seat Racing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure if my graphic did its thing.
There.
I heard it. I didn't see anything, but I heard something. Thank you very much, Front Seat. That's interesting to hear about that. Okay, so and what
it's something that they do not have implemented in iRacing, as far as I know, for dirt stuff.
Well, and maybe with version, what do you think, V9? No.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing to do. I would think that there's more factors that they have to consider with that.
Right. Well, just a little heads up. I'll cover this at the end as well. But so Friday night trucks will happen tonight. We'll run the Pro 2 Light at probably Wild West. I think would be more.
I would do the shorter track, whichever one that
Wild Horse. Well, they're the same length, they say, but Wild Horse seems smaller.
I was going to say Wild Horse seems smaller.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go. Anybody got my email earlier? It's going to be Wild Horse and the Pro 2 Light truck. That way, well, I don't know if that really lets more people get involved. I think if you bought the trucks, you bought the 2 tracks. Right. So it'd be pointless to do otherwise. So I don't know if that actually. So that's the crappy thing. That doesn't actually get anybody in to the racing unless we ran like the Daytona Rallycross.
Yeah, you could do like a Rallycross track or something.
Maybe that's what we'll have to do. I don't know. Apparently, I'm mixing it up. And the other thing I was getting at is that instead of doing a Friday night truck series, we're going to do a couple of patron races over the weekends for the next 2 weeks. But then I think after that, I'm going to start a Friday night Skip Barber series with the new damage model and them being officially on the new tire model. It'll be fun. It'll be a lot of fun. So that's going to come up, and I'll let people know more about that. And that's utilizing part of Season 4 build as well. Other story from iRacing is they're developing 2 new Australian supercars.
Yay!
Yay! So I'm assuming that's a Holden and a Ford. That looks like is that a Mustang?
It's a Mustang.
Yeah.
Yep. The Mustang with the huge wang on the back.
Huge wang.
It's ridiculous. Have you seen it? It's ridiculous.
Oh my. So that's good news. I was going to say for the Australian people, but that's actually a cool pairing of cars. So I'm sure that'll be popular. Why are they not? It's not the V8 supercars anymore, huh? That series kind of went kaput, didn't it?
No, so they tried to just, I think it might be branded just supercars now. But I think at one point they were trying to test the V6s. I don't know if they ever did anything with it, but it's still the same series. I think they just branded it as supercars, not V8 supercars anymore.
Right.
If I remember right. But I'm excited. I love the supercars. I totally want to drive these.
They're always fun, and any version of them, they are a handful, and that's always my favorite thing about cars in general. And in fact, as things get more and more clinical in racing, I'm finding that I really appreciate the older cars even more because they're more fun to drive. Perfection, sure, new cars are amazing, but something about the way the old ones were. Scuderia Bassani, thank you so much.
Brad Morrison says the Holdens are 6s, so that is why they had to change the name. I couldn't remember if they actually went to the 6 or not. Because we in the United, I have to like watch on YouTube like the highlights because we don't get
it's not really
supercars here
put here much at all. All right, so more cars to buy on iRacing.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I said, I'm excited. It looks cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully that comes with the new tire model. I mean, it should. Seems like the new stuff is releasing with the tire model. So.
And what else?
Dirt Road Book. They just produced, let's see, it says version 1.8 of Dirt Rally 2.0 is here. This is as of today, September 6th. And it comes with a whole bunch of fixes, improvements, and new things to do. Way to tell us. The headliners at our official competitive gaming series is kicking off next week with the qualifiers starting on September 10th for both Rally and Rally Cross. There's obviously a place to go for full details on the series. But their main thing is here, they want you to do the qualifier. Even if you don't compete in the qualifier, you can still drive the BMW M2 competition, which is what I think you talked about on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I was questioning that. I think that's the best car you can buy for the road.
That's right. So, there you go.
And I'm not a huge BMW fan, by the way. So as I make that statement or proclamation, I'm not even a huge BMW fan. But what I've heard, that car is just a piece of perfection. Like maybe the greatest car you can actually spend your money on. That's what I've heard. So,
one other thing that this reminded me of, because it said, at some sort of test area or something like that. WRC8 has a test area that's not, how they would do the compounds?
Yeah.
In Rally? Okay, this is not a compound. It has a compound kind of in it. It's a full-blown area that you can, like, do a whole, like, short little rally circuit all the way out into the woods. You go around a lake, and it goes from tarmac to dirt or gravel, and
just like random dirt roads.
It's cool.
Like if you owned a rally car and just kind of went off into the hills out by where you live.
Yeah, but this is like bigger. It's like a town. There's like a little town hub that you can kind of run through. It's got this warehouse area, but then if you take off out of that little, I mean, it's only like 4 or 5 buildings, but if you take off, all of a sudden you start going through and you're out in the woods, you're going by a lake. I mean, it's really neat.
Oh,
like, what a great idea.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. This one
I
here,
want you to
yeah.
talk about this.
I don't know if this is even news, but this is definitely our WTF of the
It's the
day.
homunculus.
The Acer, I remember talking about this a long time ago, by the way, but the Acer reveals its $14,000 gaming chair. Um, Look at this is the Predator Thronos Air gaming chair. It's modeled after its previously announced $30,000 Predator Thronos, but
This is the hype beast.
this thing is insanity. But like,
Oh no, it is the air. Okay,
yeah. Anyway,
it's confusing.
so if you have $14,000 and you'd like to buy a very elaborate gaming chair, Acer's wants to talk to you. That's all I have to
Yeah,
say.
but what are the side pod things? Like, I know our audio only listeners can't see it, but it's huge. It's got this arm that comes over the back of the chair, right? And it holds 3 monitors. And then it has, what would be a tray where I would assume you could mount, your wheel. It looks like it has some flight deck control spots to mount things. I'm assuming there's enough room to put your pedals down. I mean, it's tough to see, but the weird part is it has these side things that are standing up, and I can't tell if that serves a purpose or not.
Yeah, I think well, I mean, half of what I'm looking at here is just to create like aesthetics, like these like weird bars up around the hoopy thing, just to be able to get those blue LEDs. It seems, they're just purely styling. So half of it is styling. There are accessories that can be mounted, like cameras, hubs, other accessories, and even get this, a cup holder.
Ooh. Ooh.
Anyway, that seems really obscene.
Yeah, it is. It looks like a serpent, like it. I don't know. It looks like some sort of mechanized thing.
So, can you see a like Call of Duty tournament where you're gonna have like 20 of these up on a stage? Everybody's in their little pods.
For $14,000? No.
Well, they got to market this thing somehow.
Yeah, but can you, like, maybe if it was like a 1v1 or 2v2, but I mean, having like a full-blown tournament with these things just seems to be really expensive.
It's so elaborate and so expensive for really so little.
A cup holder that settles it.
But like, there's so much to it and so much expense, and then you think, well, but what is it really giving you? It's not that big a deal. That's what.
Maybe if you had like a center or something that had showing off flight sims or sim racing or something, maybe having one and charging people. I don't know. Sometimes I often wonder who is this marketed towards? Who is going to buy such a thing? And I'm sure somebody will buy it. I'm just not sure who it is.
So like, doing that, I do all this work with, various motion sim companies, and I've done my share of installs for the wealthy. They want elaborate game rooms and things, but one thing I've noticed about them is they also need everything they own to be very approachable. It can't look hard to get in and out of. Like, I don't even, like, how do you, those side things open up? Am I supposed to climb limbo in?
If you look at them, like, they're not flat. So I don't know. It's a whole lot of confusion going on there. Maybe the front part opens up, or maybe the seat slides backwards and then, turns, it articulates around. And
14 grand. I want
just
a key
hit the
fob.
eject seat.
Yeah, I want to press a button, and I want to see that whole scorpion tail open up, and then I climb in and press the button, and it closes without crushing me. But yeah, when I think of rich people who want elaborate game rooms, I don't see them, like, money is no object for these people. So 14 grand doesn't scare them, but I don't see that being that approachable. So, all right. Anyway, I just thought that was funny and worth talking about. Next up.
Yeah, we've already said it. WRC8 is out on the Epic Games Store. It is also out on consoles, so that's that. I think
$49.99.
I think I've said everything so far that I want to say.
I don't think that's a bad price point. A lot of things are coming in like
It's $49.99 for the standard. The deluxe edition that concludes, I think, everything is $59.99.
yeah, which isn't
So
even
they do that
that
whole
bad.
garbage thing where they separate out, and I think it's the classic cars that they separated out. It's kind of like, okay.
I'm
Let's
looking
see. We've
for
got next up. We've got another hot fix for Wreckfest. This is
Yeah,
number 3.
thank God. I drove Wreckfest this weekend. That's something else I didn't mention was that I did drive the new Wreckfest. And some of the new additions to the game are really awesome. I mean, like, some of the new tracks are really cool. Some of the new arenas are really cool. The motorhome in certain circumstances can be cool, and some other new cars that are really cool. But my first impressions were like, oh my God, they've ruined the game. Like, it doesn't drive right anymore.
I heard people were not happy with the first update.
Yes.
Were not happy with how they changed the driving for the vehicles, which is disappointing. I have not tried it. And then people either it's fixed or it's getting fixed. I can't quite
Well,
tell because some people say,
By Hotfix 2, the rumor was that it had been fixed or was getting
okay,
better. So, and now we already have Hotfix 3. So this is like in the span of time from when I've left to here we are today, we've had not only the release, but 3 hotfixes already. So,
well, and it's a curious thing, and it's kind of like what ACC did, in my opinion, is you had something that was really good. Why did you feel the need to change it? Were you just scared? Were there just a vocal minority that, you just, oh, everybody must think this way? I'm not. Was it like you said to, I think it was the other day where you said, was it to appease and make it more uniform for the console market? So
right.
if they, if the consoles couldn't necessarily perform those calculations, then did they dumb down Wreckfest for the PC, which doesn't make any sense. Why not just leave the PC version as standalone and have I mean, you already put all the development into the console version to put it that way. So just separate the two.
Instead of
Like,
going
you're
to
not cross-platform playing here.
right.
So that's an odd, I don't know, that's an odd thing to do, man, but
LCD,
I don't
man.
know.
LCD, lowest common denominator. It's where we're going. It's where we're headed. It's what everything's going to become. Sorry, I'm too pessimistic on a Friday. What do I mean by that? I mean, no, why don't they just make, like you said, the PC version? It could be standalone. Sure, have compatibility or the same game for the PS4 and the Xbox, because you know what? People would argue all day long if there was a big difference between those two.
Right.
It's okay for the PC to be a different level. It's a bigger piece of machine. Your average console costs $400. Your average PC costs $2,000. You get to play more. You get to crunch more numbers with that. So
Yeah, I think they did. Again, I have not tried it. I've just listened to yourself, and looks like, again, thanks everybody hanging out in the chat, but I've seen several people post here and then the other day on your show that it wasn't the same. And it's like, why would you mess with something like that? It was so good to begin with. And it's one of two things. Either just like Amir also said, could the consoles not handle the physics part of it, so they just dumbed it down across the board? Or did they just feel like nobody's going to like this when it gets released to the console market, so we need to put everybody on the same playing field because for reasons I don't know.
Right, like it would be too difficult for the gamer crowd, so we need to make it just like Twisted Metal. And not to take anything away from Twisted Metal, but it was a total
it's a different game. Yeah, that's a different game though. And what you started out with was so much fun, and then you get rid of that, and it's kind of like it's just like when I talk about when these companies release cars that don't have a good baseline setup out of the gate. When you had a fan base that was telling you this is a lot of fun, like these are great, and then you go and change it, all you do is, if you had DLC plans or anything else, you just killed
Right.
any chance of sales for your game. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Right.
I don't know. It's an odd thing to do. So maybe they're going back the other direction.
Possibly. This one's all you.
Oh yeah, just that Tim Ryan is now their new VRS, Virtual Racing School for iRacing, is their new dirt oval coach, which is great. He put on some exciting drives last season, and he's a champ, so he obviously has an idea of what he's doing. So anybody that uses the VRS and system and wants to learn how to race on dirt, as long as he can explain it, he's an excellent person to teach people.
All right. He's got the credentials.
That's right.
And then finally, last news story is FIA Gran Turismo Championship season. So another version of the Nations and Manufacturers Cup, which will begin November 18th within the sport mode of the game. So they're keeping everything going on their fun as well. Also extending everything out into 2020. So lots of cool competitions across the board. As all these games come out, I think that ends up being one of the next question is what kind of esport or online competitions are they going to have within them. I'm also just thrilled the way Gran Turismo has taken a title and maintained its life for such a long period of time.
That is pretty impressive. You know, it's very iRacing-esque, and all their updates are free.
Yeah. Tim, thank you for plugging the half price September on Twitch. Anybody who watches on Twitch, yep. Subscribe for half the price, but the streamers get the full consolation. So thank you for that. And Amir, yes, getting back to the Acer Predator. Anybody who watches or remembers or loves the movie Grandma's Boy, JP was the I Want Robot Legs character from the movie, and he had a gaming chair that was pretty close to this.
Okay.
And I see my search is looking for Magnum condoms. How random is that?
Whoa.
Interesting.
Well,
A little of that for everybody. There you go. So, anyway, that's pretty much the end of the news. Again, I want to talk. I think one of the things that you and I talk about directly and indirectly often is sim racing, and a lot of us have this need to think it's the same or this perfect emulation of real life racing, hence the word sim. And I think that you and I think my opinion, I think I used to feel the need to convince people it was more real than it is. So having been involved in sim racing since the very beginning days to this day, I think now that it's gotten more realistic than ever, I'm willing to back away from my need to say that it's this amazing parallel to real life racing. I think there are a lot of aspects of it that do parallel real life racing, but I don't think it's any more like real life racing than baseball is like football. I mean, or, football to basketball. You see cross sport talent from time to time, so there's something about playing a ball sport that carries over to other ball sports. So chances are, if you're really good at basketball, you probably don't suck at soccer or football or anything else. Like, there's something built into your DNA that allows you to be good with handling a ball and doing that. So anyway, going into this Lucky Dog race at Laguna, Laguna might be the track that I have more sim racing laps on than any other track. So I'm very knowledgeable of Laguna. I was able to get a version of the Lotus, the Chotus, and prepare for the race. So I was driving a really good version of the car at Laguna. And so here I am with my simulator and all my resources, able to throw everything I've got at it to do as much preparation for the real life thing. And so here's my takeaway. Because the minute I got in the real life car, the first thing that occurred to me is, wow, this is nothing like the sim. Nothing. And this is where I think, we've got Darren from Sim Experience here. We talk to other peripheral company manufacturers, maybe the iRacing people. The intensity is so far from that like I don't think there's never been a sim situation where just being in the car caused any kind of elevated heart rate. By the time you're belted into the car, and I needed kind of a flashback to remember some of this stuff too, but man, the minute you're belted into that car, your head is kind of tripping because you are not in your normal world anymore. And sim racing doesn't do that. There's no claustrophobic feeling. If you've never worn a Hans device with a helmet, you've never experienced just how little you can see. So when we're there wondering and critiquing car model interiors and things like that, it's like, well, you have to realize that in modern racing, they make you wear a Hans. If you're wearing a Hans...
Yes, Hans and the containment seat. That's what I've always argued with people.
Part triple of the reason screens why, my ass.
that's always been my point. And I know I get a lot of flack for it. And I've always tried to explain, look, I understand why you want the triple screens, and I understand why you like the VR. I get it. It's because it's different. Right. You are not. This really doesn't
feels more immersive, but it's further from realistic.
It's actually farther removed from the real thing. I made the same comparison when in slot cars they went to digital. So analog is one car per lane.
Okay.
Digital came out and you could run 2 lanes of track with these crossover pieces. You could run up to 24 cars if you wanted to. And people's like, oh, it's going to be so realistic. It's not, though, because you've only got certain places you can change and it causes a whole other set of problems. So to me, the analog system was actually more closely related to real racing because I could try and outbrake somebody going into the corner.
Right. Because you needed to use more skills involved to make it happen.
It's just it's a different skill set, but I just found analog racing to be more, if you want to compare it to real world terms, realistic. So I've always argued that it's cool. Triple screens look amazing, like it, and so does VR. But I often watch a lot of people in VR. They're really turning their heads.
Right.
And and then triple screens, you get to see all this stuff way over here. And that's why I said when I ended up getting this monitor, that this 35-inch BenQ that's curved, ultra wide, to me it's almost perfect, because that's about what you would see if you had a helmet on. And if you were strapped into a car and you had a Hans device and all this, a full containment seat that limits how much you can actually turn your head. Right. So I've always maintained that, if realism is what you're striving for, then you shouldn't be able to change the degrees of rotation on your wheel and all these other things. So sim racing is, in that respect, it is just a different thing. We are taking real world things and trying to emulate those things. But when it comes down to it, you're doing it from the comfort. You're doing it from the ease of use standpoint. So you can see more what's going on. It's a different animal.
Yeah, and somebody had mentioned, VR with a Hans. Now, see, the problem is, and this is what, where, and these are just some of the little differences that when I was back in a real car, and again, karting is even different. Because in karting, I could look over my shoulder. I had a lot of movement. You had your neck donut, but it allowed full movement of the head. In a Hans, you can't even look down. I mean, like, this is about the amount of movement of my helmet. Um, so VR with the Hans, and this is where VR is still a little bit wrong. It needs to be eye tracking only, not or 90% head tracking, 10% head movement. Way back when, I don't know how many people used Track IR, but it was like you put these little
Yeah.
reflectors and it sensed it. So when you turned your head, it would turn the view of sim racing. And I hated it instantly because I'm like, you don't lead with your head, you lead with your eyes. I'm like having to do everything backwards to make Track IR work.
Yeah, I could
Um,
never use track IR because of that. I looking towards the edge of the screen always messed me up. Like I don't know. It was just backwards. Like you said, it's backwards to me.
Yeah, and now I'm even questioning VR in that respect because it's like, well, again, I don't need to move my head at all to be a race car driver. I need to move my eyes because in that car, I'm looking to Apex. I have all the view I want, but it's only happening in my eyes through this portal. You know, that's part one. Intensity. When I was belted in, it was hard to breathe. So like
It's very uncomfortable.
it
it is not. It is not fun.
and I'm not new to this either, by the way. So it's not like, oh my God, I've never had belts on. No, I've been belted in. But coming off of so many laps of practice and then trying to go out on the track and act like I'm going to duplicate what I did in practice, now all of a sudden I can't move my head. I can barely breathe. And I'm just like squeezed down into this car. All right. And we haven't even rolled off pit lane yet. Next, heat. I bitch about sweating here, and I'm going to do a cool suit for my sim rig because I don't like sweating. It makes me uncomfortable. Well, in real life, that's a factor that you have to overcome. So when you wonder, why are these guys so fit? Number one, they need to be strong. Number two, they need to be light. Number three, they need to be able to breathe better because you're belted in. You're just not going to breathe as efficiently. So you need to be coming from a better starting point. And then lastly, I think is, well, fighting off heat. The more in shape you are, the more your body's used to having an elevated temperature, and you're going to be sweating just a little bit less because this will be more normal. You're accustomed to it. You're acclimated to it. You're fit for it. Um, the heat of the car, our car was not running well, and we had exhaust issues that were actually putting a little extra exhaust into the car, which didn't help the breathing, and it also didn't help.
I've actually almost passed out because in sprint cars we use methanol, and the methanol fumes actually replace the oxygen in your lungs. And I've been idling around when somebody's been too rich and literally like got tunnel vision and the whole thing. And I'm lifting my face shield, I'm moving,
trying to get
I'm
air.
moving the air, and finally it was like, it is so scary when you're still conscious and you actually can't take a breath in. Your lungs are trying to contract.
Right.
You're trying to expand, and trying to breathe in the air, and nothing's happening. Absolutely
Yes.
zero. And you're just like, and all I could think of was like doing this. And finally I got enough of the fumes out of there that it finally went, holy cow, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it changes
It's
your
yeah.
ability.
Mhm.
Anybody watched the movie Right Stuff? They did a little thing where they're all oxygen depleted, and the guys are trying to do rudimentary tasks. And how difficult, like just playing, like putting a ball on a hole can be when you're low on oxygen. And then the last one was again the heat. It had to have been 130 in the car.
I've raced in the sprint car, 104. And so in the evening it cools off and it was like just under 100 degrees. But we ran like 20 laps, green flag. And then we had a red flag. Somebody flipped. So a red flag happens. In a sprint car, you are set directly above the rear end.
Right.
And all the heat from the rear end just swarms, and then all the heat from the engine, because the engine's right there,
Right.
just comes back in. Holy cow, it's so
It was
brutal. Like the heat is just
insane.
yeah.
And my right foot was on fire. I mean, like there's kind of a burnish
Uh-huh.
mark on my shoe now.
Yeah.
Um,
Need a little bit of that heat shielding on your foot or on that part of the
we were doubling up socks. We were putting metal tape on it, like anything you could.
right.
And so this all gets to before we even are feeling the rubber on the road. That was the conditions difference that I'm not sure I even want all of it duplicated in my sim racing, but as we sit there thinking we're honing our skills, you can be the best sim racer in the world. Now do it at 130 with lack of oxygen, zero mobility, and can you still be the sim racer in real life that you thought you would be? So those were the intensity factors that and then with all those come other factors. So the lack of movement. Well, I have pretty good mirrors in that car. I've got one of those curved big mirrors in the center. I've got regular mirrors. I can see them all from my driving, but you can't watch them all, right? I mean, when we're in sim racing, we have our virtual mirror and it's right there. So I'm
Right.
looking at driving line. I'm just a little flick of the eye, and hey, there he is. There he is. In real life, that is a big switch. Going from track to the mirror is a total dedication, and you are no longer seeing the track at all. And the same thing if you're looking at your side mirrors, which means you're really not looking at your mirrors nearly as much as you do in sim racing, which is good. Your awareness of whether other cars are is just cut in half. Like, is he to my inside? I have no idea. I don't remember that happening to me in karting. I don't remember that happening to me in open wheel, but all the times I drove open wheeled, it was before the Hans device where you could still turn your head and see a wing just over there. So with peripheral and just a little twist of the head, you'd know somebody was there. In this Chotus, I was blind as a bat. And that is something that I feel is I don't know if I want them to duplicate that in sim racing, but we're always going to be that much more removed.
And I think to clarify, I think the point that we're making here is there often it gets stated it's just like, real racing. It's, it's got all these it has parallels, but I still find that there is a lot don't get the braking right. A lot of them don't get, we're talking about tire models. How long has iRacing been out? Each tire model is the next best tire model.
Right.
ACC, each tire model is the next best tire. Like, it's always the next best thing. And I think that there are just.
All right, let's talk about
the misconception. Well, I think the misconception is for a lot of people that if you can do well here in sim racing, like it's going to cross over to real racing. And some of it, William Byron said the same thing. Some of it does apply. If we're talking about things that can't obviously be simulated. The heat, even G-force, I would argue, is not. Movement is G-force is a different thing. But it's so easy to be distracted in sim racing. I've never found myself distracted racing in the real world.
Not at all.
No, it just doesn't happen.
If your brain is capable of another thought, then you probably shouldn't be in a race car. Like,
you can be relaxed. You can be relaxed, and you can, you can have thoughts that relate, but I find it easier to be distracted just completely sim racing just because the environment's different. So obviously those things can't be simulated. So let's take that out of the equation. There are still things that happen in sims that just it's not one-to-one. There's some of the car handling. I mean, I don't know quite how to say it. It's just I've always, when I first started with sim racing, I struggled. And then when I finally wrapped my brain around, sim racing is just a different thing than the real world, because my real world tells me you can do this, you can't do this. This doesn't feel the same. That feels different. X, Y, and Z. So it's when I took it forward, this is a different thing. I have to learn this thing, and I can apply ideas. I can apply apexing. I can apply racecraft. I can apply certain things from the real world from my experience. But overall, it is a different thing. And I think a lot of times people get hung up on the, I don't know, the crossover.
Right.
Is that the right word?
Sure. Yes, I think it is crossover and no better than crossover. It's not necessarily one to one. Another thing that really stood out to me. So the car model I used was really accurate. The track model I used was really accurate. My braking and shifting points were really on the money. My turn-in points were on the money. But with all of that being one to one as far as timing goes, and that's where I'm going to get back to where our crossover I'll give you a parallel that I think is fair. It was nothing like doing it. Even though everything there was one to one on the money, man, the braking spot was exactly where I was braking in the game. But the way I broke and the sensation and feedback I got, nothing like
to me, the
other.
braking is one of the biggest differences in sim racing versus real life racing. You utilize the brake so different.
The moment of brake lockup in real life is one of these like most pathetic moments of weakness that you'll feel. Because the car does nothing, right? I mean,
yep, like, it just keeps going the direction you don't want it to go.
It's not slowing down. It's not turning. It's not doing anything until I recover from that lockup. In the sim, I almost feel like we can purposely lock it up and drive through the lockup. There is no... The minute you recover from lockup, now all you're trying to do is save the corner so that it's not off the track. And that happened to me a handful of times, and I'm like, that never comes across in my mind in sim racing. That happened in the Volvo, by the way. It made me remember it used to happen in shifter carts as well. And I just kind of had forgotten how useless I feel at that moment. Again, I just like for this, it's all milliseconds, of course, right? But in these milliseconds, you're like, oh shoot. And you like want to throw your hands up. I've ruined everything, and that was something. And then here's the other one I'm going to say. Turn 9. Anyone who knows turn 9, this is the corner after the corkscrew at Laguna. And I actually think turn 9 is one of the hardest corners in sim racing.
That's the left-hander, correct?
Yeah, the downhill left-hander.
Yeah.
That you're not sure if you're supposed to be inside, outside, in the middle. Do I try to keep balanced throttle? Do I touch the brake? That car, I looped it in practice on that corner. And here's the other big difference. Because I looped it in practice, I was now handcuffed to just how hard I could push that corner for the rest of the weekend. In sim, if I spin it, I'm going to attack it even harder the next time. In real life, I had to bring it down to 9/10 because, you know what? I can't have that happen again. I was lucky that it didn't go bad. It went really well. I popped the clutch in, spun it, full 360, saved it, and just went about my way. Didn't even go off track. But I've watched cars wreck there hundreds of times, and that is a really bad wreck. That's not pull it in the pit and we'll just, that's a put it on the trailer, we're done. That handcuffing, that limitation that happens after a real life event. Part of it was my sensibility of not wanting to hurt the car, and the other was, we've talked about this too, like that bravery thing where you want to put your left foot over the right foot to make sure it stays in the throttle because your brain's chickening out. That was happening too. My brain was refusing to keep that pedal down. No matter how much I wanted to,
right.
It would not.
I guess that's why I kind of when I talk about how a car drives in sim racing, I talked earlier about feeling secure. every car I've driven or raced, the amount of aggression I have is similar. I just have to modify like my entry and exit, and like you get, I don't know how to explain it. You get an on the edge feel no matter the car, right? Every car has a limit, but when you get to the limit, you kind of have that. I mean, I imagine in that Volvo, like you in the Chotus, like you can really move the car through the corner.
Oh yeah.
Like that thing's probably not very planted, but it is.
It's
Because
very
you can
lively
feel,
too.
because you can feel the edge, right? You
Yes.
can feel where that limit is.
Yes.
So you may not be able to drive it the same as another car, but as a driver, you are still driving 100% or 99% because you can feel the edge, the limit.
Yep.
And in a lot of sims, I don't feel the limit. And that's what's always been my complaint, is that when I'm driving the new tire model in iRacing, it feels much better,
Right.
but I still don't feel like the car is really giving me that idea. If the best example I can ever give again is taking one of the Caterhams out in Automobilista and going around Cadwell or something, that car to me is one of the best representations of what I'm trying to explain. You can wring that thing by the neck. I mean, you can grab that thing by the horns and hustle. You can hustle the car.
Right.
In every car I've ever raced in the real world, I've been able to hustle the car to its limit, which may not be the same as another car, but I can hustle it. I can use the brake. I mean, we're talking about the braking. I use the brake. And it is no matter the adjustments we make in our pedals and in the sim, I can make it so that I can drive it. It's not the same though.
Right. Right.
And the only one to me that's ever gotten really close to that for the braking was ACC's very first iteration of 1.0. I was so impressed because that was the one that I thought most emulated what it was like to brake in a race car. And since then it's different. So and a lot of people don't like, not everybody, but there are a lot of people that don't like the sound of when I say those things.
Right.
Like it's a different thing, and I often have to disassociate myself. I hate using the term realistic because it's almost a different animal. It is
Right.
definitely trying to simulate. It's definitely trying to be a facsimile of certain aspects of the car. Like, great, we have the right dimensions, we have the theoretical right horsepower, the torque curves, the tire widths. We've got all these things that are supposed to be right. That's why we laser scan tracks, so we can
Right.
get all the nuances in the road and get the correct width and corner radiuses. So we have all these things, and it does it really well.
Right.
But it's just not the same.
And that's proven by, again, one thing I have to give 100% credit to is the simulated versions, braking points, shifting points, turn-in points. To an extent, I'll even give the force feedback being pretty darn close. Like the load on my wheel was really similar to what I felt in the real car. But see, here's the thing. So turn 3 at Laguna.
See, force feedback, though, is one of those things I would argue isn't. Because often the force feedback will give you things in a sim that you would never get in the actual wheel in a real car.
So here's my reasoning on this thinking is turn 3 at Laguna, the car would wiggle on entry every single time. Like I tried 1,000 different ways of getting through turn 3 fastest. But every single one of them, no matter what, the car got a very uncomfortable wiggle on entry. Just, it would dive the nose really hard, and the rear end would start to move. And this car, you have a fair amount of room to wiggle the car, the rear end of the car. But it moves fast enough that if you overdo it, it will be
right.
backward.
And every car has that moment where it starts to lose it. Even a downforce car will, even though it will snap, it still has a point where you can feel it. I mean, you watch the IndyCar guys, right? The
Right.
car still wiggles and they hang on to it, but their margin of error is much smaller because
Yes. Yes.
that stuck to gone notion is much smaller than like a car you're driving, but it'll still take
It'll
off on you.
still jump around on you for sure. Um, but like, you know how like a dog will bark before the earthquake? Like they heard the rumble or caught some vibe before the earthquake. I feel like that's what's missing in sim racing is that in real life, when you get that wiggle, it hits you hard. It's not just a little subtle cue in the force feedback. It's a subtle cue in the force feedback or what you're feeling in the wheel multiplied by that seat of the pants, multiplied by the change in view. So we get two of the three in sim racing. We get the force feedback, we get the changing of pixels, where the rotation change happens. But without that G-force, without that gravitational difference, it doesn't smack you in the face. So what I was feeling in the real car is once I learned the catch throttle point, that neutral wheel on the gas a certain amount point
It's like
that would
you're
just
almost
save
not
it.
steering the car anymore. It's like the
Right.
car's just kind of guiding itself around the corner.
Yes. And in real life, the car does that so beautifully. You get the pre-warning so that as long as you react quickly, all you had to do is go light on the wheel, back down the gas, and the car just recovered itself perfectly. And I feel like in sim racing, we don't get that slap in the face fast enough that forces us to almost overdrive those moments where we're just not as quick to catch them. And next thing you know, we just have lost all handling of the car. Um, in real life, even on a sketchy car, it's like, yes, but the boundary is so clearly pronounced to your inner ear that you are very quick to know that boundary. It doesn't take 100 laps to know the balance of the car or the fine line of when you've gone too far. It only took a matter of a handful of laps to have a good portion of that understanding. And then you need a few moments to find the rest of them. And then the other thing I'm going to say is elevation in Sims is still just not dramatic enough. So using the corkscrew as an example from, the top of the corkscrew to turn 10, I don't know the exact amount of height elevation that you've dropped, but, it's 5-6 stories easily, probably more than that. And it is so significant coming over the top of a hill and transitioning to down the hill. And the way the car handles on the two is so distinctly different as well, that I just feel like that's something that is just really not felt at all in sim racing. And with that comes other little things like, so another corner before the race, there were two corners that I feared going to Laguna. Turn 9, which we could do you can roll or I could do an intermission. Actually, I'm pretty much done. If you want to wait, I'm pretty much on my final thought on this.
Okay.
Turn 9 and turn 6 were my two fears going in. I actually didn't fear the corkscrew at all. The corkscrew's not actually very difficult in real life. You brake adequately, you cut it in sharp, you be patient before you make your right.
Well, and you get that settling feeling when you
at
Laguna, you kind of crest and then everything settles and you get this like, ugh.
Yeah.
And the car just feels like it's in the track and man, you just go right through the corner.
Yeah, it's like you and the car get out of there like relieved. Okay, we set it up right, we got out right, and we have all the grip we need. Turn 9 was scary as could be. But here's the funny thing. Turn 6, which is what has always been difficult in sim, was so much easier in real life. Like, even with my limited visibility.
Is 4 the first left-hander? So you go turn 1, 2. So then you have the double rights.
That's 5. Is the really cambered left-hander.
5 is really sketchy.
Camber.
To me, 5 was sketchy.
I left so much time in turn 5. Like I was losing maybe a full second off of what I could do with more practice at 5. Just overbroke it. didn't
Mm-hmm.
didn't carry speed
The amount,
and
and if
get
you do, but if you do carry the amount of speed, like when I was running, if you do carry the right amount of speed through there, it's it's gnarly. Like it's trying to get away from you because it's just an odd corner, and all of a sudden
it's such a
I
motocross corner.
yeah, and six doesn't feel that way.
No,
I don't
six
know what it is.
six you just kind of lift and turn and punch it,
Yeah, and it just
it's
kind of goes through the corner. Five is like, am I carrying too much speed? All of a sudden, here comes the edge coming out of the corner. Oh, that's too much. That's too much, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. Five will do all sorts of weird things because you can over grip it and go. And speaking of five, I saw cars spun off in and outside, and you don't. That's not usually the case. Usually, a corner is deadly one way or the other. Like if you were going to screw up six, it's going to be the outside. You know, you might double spin and end up to the inside, but for the most part, that is an outside failure corner. Turn five, I saw both. I saw guys over grip it and just get spun off to the inside. I saw guys overshoot it and just not hold the corner and just launch off the jump because it's a jump at that point, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I will say Chris Considine's probably not watching, but I watched Chris Considine make an incredible outside pass in five. I'm just gonna, if he's watching, I'll give him credit. He went in sideways and just drove around this guy, and it's not as cambered on the outside.
No.
But he hit the corner perfectly and nailed it with speed and just outran the guy up the hill with ease. It was quite amazing. Anyway, but yeah, I'll say this. I think real life racing is a lot easier than sim racing. So with all those factors,
I would 100% agree.
Sim racing is hard.
Okay. I'm going to qualify that. If you've raced and then do sim racing is harder.
Yes.
But if you sim raced and then go to the real world, there are going to be certain people that take to it like a duck to water. And so we've watched both. We've watched people are really good right out of the box. And then we watch people that it scares them. They can't get around the track to save their life because they're used to all these bad habits that sim racing is. Sim racing gives you bad habits. It does. So sim racing, that crossover doesn't work for other people. So in one respect, yes, coming from a person that raced real cars and then started sim racing, I consider sim racing much more difficult.
Yeah.
But we've also seen the inverse where people coming from sim racing get into a car. Not everybody. Like I said, some people take duck to water. Some other people are just, it's overwhelming. It's scary. There's so much information coming at them that they're just not equipped for it. They're much more comfortable in the sim environment.
Well, I think all that intensity, all those factors, because even if you're not in a race car that's super hot, generally speaking, if you're on a track in a car, it's going to be warmer than if you're on the freeway at 60 with air conditioning on. But all those intensity factors could immediately be a restrictor for a lot of people where they're just not going to push. And maybe they won't even find the boundaries of the car. So when you're saying racing is easy, I think it's easier than real life. And I'm going to immediately get in the car and try to push it to the limit and try to find those limits. That's my nature in any car, especially on a racetrack. And I have no problem trying. I do, again, turn 9, I do end up with protective forces maybe preventing me from trying to find the very edge at times. But I'm always going to be looking for that edge versus leaving a lot on the table and not even being able to use the word racing when talking about driving a car. So I think that's something, too, is that a lot of people might not. And in sim, they might not even have the sensibility to realize I'm doing 120, so they blow off the corner and fail to even turn.
Right.
So anyway, it was really interesting because I've done a lot of comparisons, but there was always something very different about the conditions. This was the one time, and it was sort of the reversal because back when I was karting, sim racing was still really coming along. And so it was like, well, I wasn't even going to really try to do that. Versus today, we've come so far, our equipment is so advanced, and now I'm going the other direction back to real life with a really good way to test it out. And certain things, you know what? Unlike everyone else there, I knew that track layout on lap 1. And there's no downplaying how significant that is.
It is a bit, that is, again, one of the big benefits of doing something like that. I mean, the particular, when I did my first road course race, there was no virtual track.
Right.
So what I did was I went on YouTube and watched and just watched a bunch of laps, and I would predict next turn it's this, next turn it's this, after I understood the track. So sim racing just makes it all that much easier because you don't have to kind of predict. You can just drive laps, and then when you get to Laguna and you're just like, I basically know where everything's at.
All I had to do was verify that it was identical, and what do you know? It's identical. Like when I was going up the hill braking for the corkscrew, I just remember Robbie Unser telling me, "Get right, get right." I was leaving a lot of on the table. My first attack at the corkscrew, man, I had my tires all the way on the right hand curve.
Yep.
Didn't leave an inch, and
you're all the way over, and then you just shoot across. And
yep, and there's that big old hump. Just skim that with the left, and it was like piece of cake, exactly like the sim. So huge advantage in that respect. And I even think like Button Willow, where I didn't have sim experience, I learned tracks pretty darn quick. I think that's one of the things that makes me a decent racer is I learn tracks very quickly. It still took 3, 5, 10 laps to really know every part. Certain parts maybe by lap 3, maybe by lap 5 I'm perfecting certain parts, but there's still a corner or two that I haven't figured out, or because I'm still perfecting other parts, the next time around I'm going to be 10 miles an hour faster.
Yeah, that's the hard part is when you're learning a circuit, it's constantly changing on you because your speed is constantly changing. Yep. So you kind of have to have this continual mentality of updating yourself, basically.
And all of that was totally minimized by the amount of sim laps. Like maybe cut as much down to a third of the amount of time. No recon laps. It was one verify lap. It was work out some speed and change my line based on faster exiting speed of the previous corner. And then it was like, okay, now just work on it. Because, and I did very well, I have to say. I'm trying to get my GoPro footage from the race. I will do a show on it, even though it's kind of self-serving. I don't, but I think it'll be cool. I want to see it, that's for sure. And, I have more. I'm going to give everyone a heads up. So, Billy, you too. I'm not going to be here in 2 weeks.
20th or something like that?
Yeah, I'm looking at my dates. Friday the 20th, I will not be here. I have another fun thing going on. So,
I don't know.
I feel so bad. I feel so guilty the amount of fun I get to have. All right, I can't hold it. I am going to Dream Racing, and I'm going to drive a Ferrari F430, a Porsche GT3 RS, and a Lamborghini Huracan. Someone had asked if I would race in a Huracan. I said no, but I'd race a Huracan, and I will be driving. So, yeah, I'm going to get to do all of that, and that's why I'll not be here in 2 weeks. So,
nice. Where are you going to go? Where's it at? Where are you going to drive at?
Doing it at California Speedway.
At California Speedway.
Supposedly they repaved the infield. If they did not, I'm going to be so pissed that we're not driving out to Vegas. If they repaved the interior of California, I'll be happy we stayed home. So
nice.
We'll see. Anyway, so that's something else. I guess I could go do some practice. Ooh, that's going to be a tough combination to recreate. California infield. There's only one sim that has that. Anyway, yeah, if anybody knows the perfect combination for me to practice up, I'll certainly do some practice. Be able to use my paddle shifters for practice. I had to modify my shifter to a 4-speed. I had to put a metal gate to trap it, so I couldn't. I was like, I don't need reverse. Just give me a perfect 4-speed, and I'll be okay for practicing. Because again, and that's the other thing. Shifting in real life versus shifting in sim. That could be a topic in its own. That alone is so different that it could be a topic of discussion on its own, because that one feature, I can't believe I left it out in all of our discussion. But yeah, the heel toe, the dealing with a proper transmission versus a sim, just press a button and get a gear. I mean, you can use a shifter all day long, but make no mistake, it's no different than 4 buttons. um, you know
I am now officially swimming.
Okay, that's it for today's show. So tonight, 5:30, trucks hosted room on iRacing. We'll be doing something in the dirt with the trucks. And then Sunday, we are going to have a patron-only race at 10 a.m. in the Skip Barber at a free track. That's all I'm going to tell you. Skip Barber at a free track. And I know that's super short notice, so next Sunday, we're going to do another patron race. Next Sunday, I'm going to do a drawing for a t-shirt to anybody from the patron community. And anybody who's part of the patron team, I do have a new batch of stickers in 4 colors. If you didn't see the notice and you'd like one,
Fancy.
just hit me up on Discord and we'll get you set up. I'm going to the post office today to get these out. So, and that won't be the only opportunity. But tonight, trucks, Sunday, Skippy, 10 a.m. Maybe the guys will be doing some Wreckfest with the 3rd build tomorrow morning, hopefully. That would be fun as well. But that's going to do it for this one. Billy, thank you very much. Great discussion.
Yes, thank you.
And
good to be back. Thanks to everybody for hanging out.
And everybody, get out there, do some racing. Tell us your thoughts on real life versus sim. But that's going to do it for today. This is Beyond the Sim. I'm Shaun Cole. That's Billy Strange. And we will see you on the track.
See ya.